Hello, everybody out there in podcast land. This is Stan Doc Manis with another podcast about recovery and how to make it easier. Today we're talking with Jim. Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Stan. I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's very nice to have you. Jim, I want to start out by saying that even though I've never attended any formal meetings or anything like that, I am a friend of Bill's and have been for 38 years and have a few ideas about what works and what doesn't work. And I understand that you're a friend of Bill's too. Is that correct?
Yes, I am, and I have attended meetings, and they've been the shining star in my life because
Shining star.
they give me hope.
They give you hope. Okay, now hope, small four-letter word, but so powerful. Can you say more about that?
Well, hope is something that as a person active in substance abuse, and in my case, it was alcoholism, it goes away. It seems to be gone. You grow up, you have this view of the future and how wonderful it's going to be, and then you succumb to the power of John Barleycorn and alcohol, and it takes away that hope from you. And then the focus becomes, how can I drink more? And I don't want to drink more.
Beautiful point. And that reminds me of like what's referred to as the biopsychosocial pattern of development, where there's the body. And let's just keep it simple and say mind, body, spirit, but it's what's learned in our environment. We start out pure, and pure as the driven snow. And happy kids, and we grow up and we're full of hope, but then something happens and all of a sudden we don't feel that way anymore. And then we discover John Barleycorn, we discover alcohol, and all of a sudden, hey, I don't feel as bad anymore. This makes me feel better. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's precisely what I'm saying. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, and my head has been bobbing up and down. I took that first drink and I knew I had found the answer. And from everybody that I listened to around the tables, I hear that they didn't want to be there. In many cases, alcoholics come from alcoholics' families. I did not, and they say, I'm never going to be that way. I'm never going to be that way. And then the disease of alcoholism grabs them and takes over, and they think they found the answer, but it's really only a curse.
Good point. Really good point. Definitely is a curse because it's progressive and deadly. And unless you take something really a proactive stance, nothing's going to change. And if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Precisely. And I was a couple years into recovery, maybe 4 or 5 years into recovery. And a wise person told me that. He goes, nothing changes if nothing changes. And I was well on my way in recovery, but other things in my life were displaying that I was doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, and the results were never different.
Well, Jim, this brings up a really strong point from my perception. There are counseling and therapist experts in the field over the decades, Albert Ellis, Aaron Beck, Bruce Lipton, Harvey Milkman, and they all seem to agree about beliefs and what we're talking about. If nothing changes, nothing changes. And what they say is, and this is coming from Milkman, changing thoughts is not enough. There will be no long-term behavior change unless core beliefs are changed first. Then Judith Beck, the daughter of Aaron T. Beck, the developer of cognitive behavior theory, says that the first thing with addiction clients is we must change the permission-granting beliefs about alcohol. They've got to be changed as soon as possible. Now, this is coming from the experts. How would you feel about that?
Experts have their place and they study things. And if they have experience the demons of addiction, I'm going to give them a little bit more belief, or I'm going to give them a little bit more credence, I should say. I can completely understand that belief because I grew up and I thought, if you're not drinking, you're not having fun. And when that belief was cemented in me, I would drive down the road and I'd look and I'd see people not drinking and they were laughing. I really didn't understand that. But then, when I lost control of when I drank and when I didn't drink.
Okay, way. Referring to experts in the field of counseling and therapy, among them Albert Ellis, Aaron Beck, Bruce Lipton, Harvey Milkman. And they all seem to agree about beliefs. And Milkman states that changing thoughts is not enough. He said there'll be no long-term behavior change unless core beliefs are changed first. And then a doctor by the name of Judith Beck says regarding addiction, quote, permission granting beliefs about alcohol must be addressed as soon as possible. This reminds me of a couple basic premises of a recovery program. And it says we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. And then it goes on next to say, came to believe that our power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. This brings me right back to what those quote unquote experts have said, that no, changing thoughts is not enough. You got to change the core beliefs, because to me, they're both saying the same thing. Does it sound that way to you?
It does. And when we talk about experts, Stan, if they have a direct experience, I give them a little more credence. But
when you say direct experience, do you mean that they had problems with alcoholism or other drug use?
Precisely.
Gotcha.
Okay, the core beliefs, I understand that, because I had the belief that in order to have fun, I had to be drinking. And that grabbed me, and that was my belief for a couple decades. Then when I realized, and through the grace of a power greater than myself and a family intervention, that maybe my beliefs were skewed and that not everybody did what I was doing, I opened my mind to the possibility that there could be a different way.
Maybe my beliefs were skewed. Beautiful expression. You just nailed it. That is the second stage of change. They refer to as contemplation in this field. I'll say more about that.
Okay. And that contemplation got me to think about it, and, power greater than myself. Oh, that's scary stuff. I've heard many people say that. It's scary stuff. But if I think about it, the alcohol in my life was a power greater than myself.
Right.
So I was already, giving my life to a power greater than myself. I can't tell you how many times I've sat around tables or talked to other people in recovery, and they will say, I didn't want to drink. I didn't want to drink. I drank. And, that is, and I'd ask them, and I'd say, well, why do you think you drank? And somebody hit the nail on the head one time. Well, I wanted to be someone else, somewhere else at some other time. And my belief was that drinking would put me there. And short term, it did. Until it started destroying my life.
Yep. At first, 5 or 6 beers would help you feel that way. And then it was 7 or 8, and then it was 11 or 12. It just keeps going and going. Then it's out of control.
Yep.
The idea about the non-formal ways of getting help with recovery and the formal ways, like, drug court treatment or therapy, stuff like that, seem to overlap for me, because of those statements that, admitted we were powerless and came to believe. That is all about belief change. And drug courts, for instance, exist for a couple of different reasons. One, they want to reduce recidivism or, returning to crime. And two, they want to reduce the cost of crime. So they look at it like, well, it costs so much to do these drug court programs, but the return on investment is just tremendous. And then there are people at the drug court where it used to be, they were required to attend these informal treatment programs. And since then, that has been rescinded. They'll say, no, it's not required, but if you want to, it's probably helpful. Can you see how, when they're restored to sanity, that now that the crime rates could go down?
There's no question. And all you need to do is ask law enforcement. And I don't have any statistics. All we have to see is, read the paper, and we can see that they were, intoxicated or on drugs. And that's where the problem comes. When I was in treatment, and I was fortunate enough to be able to go to a treatment center, and this doctor got up and was talking to the audience, and he said, if the medical profession would put down on people's death certificates the true cause of death, okay, car accident. No, maybe it's alcoholism, falling downstairs and breaking bones and, dying there. Were they intoxicated at the time? And what was the history before that? In America, we're just not looking at that. And so the recidivism is killing the country and killing humanity one drink at a time.
Yeah, and we see more and more of it. I mean, all these horrible things that are happening with the mass shootings and stuff like that. And how many of these people were under the influence? And then if they were, well, why were they under the influence? Why were they drinking or drugging? What caused them? And this could be that, the pain and stuff like that took away the hope before. Now they need something else to restore that hope.
Right.
You had mentioned that not only were you in the informal treatment program, but you were in a formal treatment program where that doctor spoke, for instance.
Right.
Was there a lot of paperwork there, reports and forms and insurance questions and all that?
I was blessed, I'm coming up on, through the grace of a power greater than myself, on 25 years here in January of continuous sobriety. So
Congratulations.
thank you. And I remember sitting in that office, and it was, fill this out, sign this, do this, do this. And I didn't care, because I just I was ready to have help. The key, they told me a little later in recovery, was you stand a better chance because you made your own reservation here. And I had called, I was ready. So that was that, unknowns to me at the time was that first step that I wanted change.
That is such an important distinction, because you were there, you apparently thought, okay, could have a problem, and you sought treatment yourself, as opposed to a judge saying, well, you're going to get treatment or you're going to jail.
Right.
And so that's the difference between voluntary treatment and mandated treatment. But either way, it seems there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of sign this and sign that, and do you have insurance? And maybe let's talk about change work.
Yeah. Yep. Probably they could save a lot of time. Are you ready, and do you want this? And if they were honest, there's big emphasis on honesty. Do you want this? And if they said no, then maybe we don't need to waste the money.
Yeah, and when it came to drug
Lock 'em
court,
up.
they say no, I don't want this. Okay, maybe then some time in jail would be more appropriate than putting them in the wrong level of treatment. Because to mix treatment groups, like to include high risk with low risk in groups for economy purposes, that's anticlimactic. It's not going to get the job done. You need people who are ready in a readiness group, and people who are not ready, you put them in a different level of care.
Time to rethink recovery, treatment programs too. A lot of data on that, and they could see where people that want it, higher success rate, people that don't want it, not so much.
Points. I came across an interesting statistic in a certification class a couple of weeks ago, where there was saying recovery takes 7 to 9 years. What's your opinion about that? This is recovery from alcohol and other drugs.
Right. I was just at a meeting last night. The topic that this person stated was, where else or what else have you learned besides not drinking? And your statement there about 5 to 7 years, there's a whole process of taking steps in order to have your life get better. And so we were talking about this, and I know for myself, I was given a design for living. See, I knew how to drink, and I knew a design for living, right? And for living, I'm sorry?
It's a beautiful phrase, design for living.
Yes. And the design for living is, you've been in charge of your life so far, Jim, and how's it gone for you? And I would probably, I'd probably say, well, not so good. Well, then try this. And if if it doesn't work for you, we will gladly refund your misery at the door. For me, the design for living is, where can I get one-liners that'll keep me from picking up that first drink?
Yeah. If you don't like it, refund guaranteed. If you don't like it, refund guaranteed.
Yep. And the misery will be there. And, there's people that after 10, 15, 20 years, they pick up, and that scares the heck out of me.
Yeah. Ordinarily, if you're going to do the steps on a program like that, how long does it ordinarily take to do the steps with quality?
Stan, there is you open up a door to a whole nother area, and that's willingness. The willingness to do whatever it takes to change your life. And that's not, taking a different pill. That's not turning the channel on TV. It's a willingness to really reflect on your life. And in the case of most practicing alcoholics, their life hasn't gone very well. So if they have a willingness to change, and people will say, oh, I don't have that willingness. It was pointed out to me that you can start with asking for willingness to be willing. And it's amazing that when when you ask a power greater than yourself for help and sincerely do that, miraculous things happen. And I've witnessed many of those miracles. And I
Sincerely doing that.
sincerely doing that. And that's back to, I've tried everything and nothing's worked. Well, have some hope that a power greater than yourself. Something happened on my month of treatment, and this one was a life changing. I was going through the line at dinner time with my other people that were in, because I did inpatient treatment, and I'm walking through the line and I'm going, what is this feeling I'm having? I don't get it. And it was probably a day or two later when I recognized what it was. It was 6 o'clock in the evening. It's the time I had always had a couple of belts in me, a couple of drinks in me. And my body was saying, I miss that. So that goes on to about that physical, disease concept, or disease, the reality of the disease. My body had become accustomed to having that drink in me every day by that time. And my body was saying, where is it?
This is very interesting. This is fascinating for me. So you had a 1 month treatment program, inpatient. So now next month you're going on 25 years. So
Right.
Wonderful. Any triggers, cravings, or urges in the meantime where you actually went back to drinking?
No,
Okay.
I remember a very wise person, the topic came up about relapse, and a good portion of the people around the tables had, shared their relapse experience, and a very wise person, said, no, I just want you to understand that relapse is not a requirement of
Beautiful.
recovery. It is
Beautiful.
not a requirement. And I needed to hear that at the time, because you hear these, oh, well, they've got some sobriety now and they relapsed. And, I just look for reasons not to pick up that first drink, because that's the one that'll get you. And Stan, one of my first times I came to Hawaii, I went to a meeting, and I'm sure I had 15 years of sobriety at that time. And I went to this meeting and I didn't know anyone. That's the beauty, is going to a meeting and not knowing anyone. And a very wise person told me, they talk about not picking up that first drink. He said, I'm going to give you better advice. Don't pick up the drink in front of you. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. And his point was, it's going to get in front of you, and they tell you not to pick it up. Don't think about it. But when it gets to the point that it's in front of you, that's the time you want to make sure that you don't pick up that drink.
Yeah, and people need to be aware that no matter where they go in their community, where they've gone in the same thing could happen. It can pop up right in front of you anywhere. You need to be aware of your slippery people, places, and things.
Precisely.
Yeah, because that drink can pop up anywhere. And a person leaving a meeting can walk out the door, turn to the right, and there's someone dealing drugs. They're trying to get them going on it again, because they do not want you to get better. They do not want you to heal. They want to continue to get income from you.
Right. Their motives are not so pure. And the interesting thing about that story is I could wholeheartedly relate to that, because a very good friend of mine told me the story of his experience sitting at a bar stool. He said to the bartender, give me a beer. The bartender put it in front of him, and the bartender said, are you sure you want to drink that? Now, my friend had a couple years sobriety at that time. He turned and walked away.
Did the bartender know?
The bartender knew. Yep.
Oh, beautiful. That's a great story. He turned and walked away.
He turned and walked away, and he hasn't had a drink since, and he's coming up on 40 years of sobriety.
More people need to hear that. I hope more people hear this podcast. So you were in a 1 month treatment program. I was in a 2-hour treatment program. I did mine differently. I went to a hypnotist, told her what I wanted to be told to me. He told me, and I walked out of that meeting, never drank or smoked again. And for me, that I'm going on 38 years this month. The end of the month will be 38 years. So you had 1 month. I had 2 hours.
Now, Stan, I think what's interesting on that, I bet you made your reservation for that hypnotist.
I did.
You were willing.
I did. So I was in the same stage of change that you were, at least contemplation. realization that something could be different, and I wanted it to be different. And there are ways to help people, because there's a thing called cognitive style. Cognitive style is behavior style, and what we want to learn about is, well, what is the people's map that determines their behavior? And it's based on the senses, the see, hear, and feel, the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And you saw things going on in your life that you didn't care for. Your self-talk reaffirmed this thing that something's got to change, and then you went and sought treatment. And it sounds like, whether knowing it or not, the same thing happened for you that happened for me. And with me, I had an uncle who died of cirrhosis of the liver, and it was an ugly ending. And I could, with my behaviors, I could see what was happening with my liver, and I visualized this sclerotic liver. And I smoked a lot. I was smoking 5 cigars a day, and I could visualize what was happening with my dirty, filthy lungs. And these are all on the left. The old you things I didn't want anymore, but the new you things on the right, I visualized a clean, clear, and pink, healthy heart, liver, lungs. And so I had the life that I didn't want, and I had the life that I did want. It was a very sensory experience for me, and that might have been my epiphany. That could have been my moment of clarity that something had to change, and I sought help. But I think it's interesting. You had short-term treatment. I had short-term treatment. Yet some of the drug court folks will say, no, you got to be in treatment 12 to 18 months, with the median now 12 months, and 200 hours class treatment as best practices. And I see that while it might be necessary for some, I don't know if it's necessary for everybody. I think that's all the more reason why we need to look at different levels of care. This person is a first-time weed user. This person does not go in the same group, the same treatment group that a 15 or 20-year career criminal goes in. Different levels of need, different levels of risk require different levels of care. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, yeah, it does. It and on the other hand, I know when I go around the tables, I can learn just as much from the person that just got there. Sometimes I learn more from them than the person that's set in their ways. So it's very personal, and all of those, you can't cookie cutter recovery,
I
because
agree.
it's such a personal journey.
I agree. That was a complaint that I got from a couple interns that come into my office and say, Stan, it seems like it's the same treatment planning for everybody, that's what you just got done saying, cookie cutter. And it cannot be. It cannot be effective that way. It has to be individualized treatment, groups that are appropriate, small enough sizes where it's really a group instead of a mob. An ideal treatment group is maybe 8 to 12 people, but in some of these programs, they got 30 or 35 people of all mixed needs and a risk level. And I just don't see how it can work that way.
Right. And that's what's the beauty of some of the outside programs that you talk about is if there's, if a person goes to a meeting and they don't like what they hear, they're told by someone wise, go find another meeting. Find something that works for you. And the wise people that get into long-term recovery, I think they do that, and they get better, and then sometimes they get a resentment, so they grab a coffee pot and they go start another meeting.
And hopefully that next meeting will be better.
Right.
They're going to bring positives with them, and they're going to help more people, and it just spreads and spreads.
There was a great story. It happened to me in the first week of me being in treatment, and they had given me, I think it was Librium to make sure that I didn't have the DTs. And I was sitting up in this unit, and there were visitors in the unit, and I said, well, and I wasn't afraid to talk. And I said, I really, what I just want to do is quit drinking. I now realize that is saying put the plug in the jug, but I really want to just quit drinking, and then I'm going to go back to my old bar and I'm going to play pool and just drink Coca-Cola. And it went around the room, and this very wise person said, I've just got some news for Mr. O'Doul's up there. And, and I perked up because it was about me at that point. And he goes, that's not going to work very well for long term for you. And this is serious business. And if you want to live, which I've come to know is true, you live by not killing yourself on the installment plan. But if you want to live and live a beautiful life, you'll start listening to what's being said around here. And I got most of my wisdom from other people that were experiencing, the terrible effects of active alcoholism.
Yeah, it's horrible. just the utter destruction. I mean, what it does to the individual, the mind, the body, the spirit, what it does to the family, what it does to the finances, and what it does to the community. It's
Right.
nothing. It's just a horrible process. Very
Yep.
costly for everybody involved. Anybody who has any ripple contact with individuals, there's a cost to them. It could be a neighbor down the street. It could be the kids down the street or playing with your kids. Everybody pays the price. But this has been a very interesting conversation for me. It sounds like you had an excellent success rate in your 30-day program. I had a brief program. I'm reminded of some instructors who are teaching new counselors that, well, your patients and your clients aren't going to be successful. It could take 5 to 7 treatments before they'll ever be successful. And I thought, with my experience with hypnosis, I thought that's a horrible thing to tell somebody. That's almost like a hypnotic suggestion. And I had mentioned that to an MD, a medical doctor, and the doctor said, yeah, you would disagree with that statement that it could become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because these counselors will then go on to tell their clients and their patients, well, you're probably not going to be successful the first time through this treatment. It could take 5 to 7 more treatments before you finally get what you're looking for. And I think that is one about the worst things that someone could say to future counselors and people who want treatment, because it's almost like a prophecy of doom.
I
Go ahead.
I agree, Stan, and I would love to have a debate with that person, and I'd like to find out a lot of information on their background. If an expert is telling me that this is going to happen, my experience is to first ask them, was that your experience? And if that experience, a great statement, again, I picked it up at a meeting, hardly any of mine are original. And this person said, if I share with you my experience, no.
All right.
So why don't you come into it? And then I think I've got it down here.
Well, you're talking about my statement and based on your experience.
Right. Okay. And so the expert that tells me about something, I'm going to ask that expert, is that your experience? And if they say, well, no, I've never had any experience with this, I can tell you as an alcoholic, that's going to get filed way back in my memory bank. Now, I learned at a meeting one time, this woman was listening to things, and then she said a very wise statement. And she said, my advice might kill you. My experience could save your life.
Interesting.
And I mean, that just has so much teeth. If I think I know what's best for you, another person, without walking in your shoes, and I start having a very strong feeling or opinion or tell you how it's going to be, I'm just, I'm pulling balloons from the sky. Where if I can say, I did this and it turned out poorly, so you don't have to do that. And I'm going to listen to you because I don't want things to turn out poorly.
Good point. What I find interesting in this field today is there are more and more experts, like the lady who is purported to have developed EMDR, this eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Her name is Shapiro. Wrote a book later on about getting past your past, which is strictly a self-help book. And then this other professional, Judith Beck, who followed in her dad's footsteps, has said in her book, Cognitive Therapy, that in a lot of cases, self-help books are totally appropriate because some people can benefit more from self-help. And I think these informal groups where you might have a partner to work with to kind of, help you manage your recovery can be just as effective if the person, like we were saying before, has reached at least that second stage of contemplation. And there's probably something that could be changed here. Does that make sense to you?
Yep, that makes complete sense to me.
At least these are all the things that I came to believe. It sounds like we kind of agree with each other in most of these steps. I didn't see anything where we had any issues.
No,
But,
and there was another good one that of course, the big book talks about contempt prior to investigation.
Contempt prior to investigation.
Yeah, it's a classic line, and I've got a story if we ever talk again that I can share on that. But I was reading, it happened to be Dr. Wayne Dwyer in the book of, it's a meditation book, and this one daily reading talks about a neurosurgeon telling Dr. Dwyer, that you just can't believe in a soul because he's been in all kinds of situations and through the body in many different places, and he's never witnessed the soul. And Wayne asks a classic question. He goes, well, when you've been poking around in those bodies, have you ever seen a thought? And I'm like, wow, okay. So that, that feeds into that contempt prior to investigation.
Yeah, contempt prior to investigation sounds to me like there's some bias going on anyway, and it's a limiting belief that you're not going to get past no matter what.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Jim, I think we've covered it today. Any closing thoughts before we go?
Well, I can only say that I appreciate you taking the time to focus on recovery and the importance of changing one's belief and even hoping that there is change, that change is possible. It's paramount that we as humanity starts looking at some of these things, and it can go across the board into so many different areas of life. But I'm just grateful that recovery, it has changed my life. People ask me, well, where would you be if you didn't quit drinking? And I have no question, I have no question. I would be dead. So I wouldn't be doing a podcast with you, Stan. And I'm grateful that I'm alive in the program of recovery. And for me, the 12 steps and the 12 traditions have been paramount to a happy and fulfilling life.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. If we would have been talking, it would have been in the afterlife because I was headed the same way. So I want to thank you too. Thank you for your time here. Thank you for your great thoughts. And I wish you Mele Kalikimaka and a hui ho, my friend.
Mele Kalikimaka and hui ho to you, and we'll talk again.
All right. So long.